Good morning, Mr. Michael.
Good morning, Mr. Lee.
Welcome to Tawau once again.
Thank you very much.
Is this your third time?
Oh my goodness, maybe my eighth time?
Your eighth time?
I don't know, I lost count.
Wow. Only on your eighth time I got to know you, but glad to know you. So, Mr. Michael, would you like to give a short introduction of yourself?
Well, since I am almost 80 years old, nothing is short. It's all long.
All right.
I come from the United States.
Right.
I first came here in 1966 and taught English at what is now Sekolah Menengah Kebangsaan, but was then government secondary school.
All right.
It was all Chinese medium up until Form 3. After Form 3, there was 1 year of intensive English called Remove class.
Remove class.
That was the class that I taught.
Oh.
Mr. Lim was in my very first class.
All right.
That was 55 years ago.
Okay.
And then after 3 years here, I went back to the U.S., did some more teaching, always writing, doing various things, and directed a couple of organizations, political organizations.
Oh, wow.
Having to do with prisons and the death penalty.
I see.
And came back many times, both to see my wonderful students and to eat the wonderful food in Tawau.
Oh, okay. So these are the two students who are here with us today, Mr. Lim Wei Chung and Mr. Alan Lim. Right. You are their idol. They have been talking a lot about you.
That's very nice to hear. Thank you.
Well, Mr. Michael, it is very interesting to have you here in Tawau. Did you choose to come to Tawau, or you were just sent?
I was just sent. In fact, during our training, this is in the Peace Corps, the United States Peace Corps.
Right.
We were only allowed to learn the language Malay. Bahasa Melayu.
Okay.
We could not learn Chinese.
You could not learn Chinese.
So our teachers were all Malay teachers.
All right.
I got very close to those teachers and I wanted to go to a kampong. I wanted to go to a Malay school. So when I was told I'm coming to a Chinese school, at first I was very disappointed.
Oh.
But now I'm so glad. It was fate.
Right. Would you like to tell us about your training back then, before you
Peace
came?
Corps training?
Yes.
So the way it works, if you can apply to the Peace Corps after you graduate from university.
Right.
I went to the University of California at Berkeley, where I was arrested.
Arrested?
Yes, in a very large demonstration called the Free Speech Movement. You can look it up. It was the first, the largest mass arrest up to that time.
Who was president at that time, for the record?
For the record, that would have been Lyndon Johnson.
Lyndon Johnson,
yes.
Right. Okay.
Kennedy was assassinated in 1963. I joined the Peace Corps in 1965. I graduated in 1964. When did I graduate? 1965. I graduated in 1965, joined the Peace Corps.
Right.
So you apply, and they send you an invitation to a particular project.
Okay.
The first one they asked me to join was a project in Brazil. It's called community development, finding wells for water, building schools. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to teach.
Okay.
So I said no, thank you. Then the second time they said a teacher in Malaysia.
Oh.
I had a big map on my wall in my apartment, and I thought, Malaysia, it must be Asia. Where is it? So I went to my map, and I found Malaysia. I got very excited. And then the training was in Northern Illinois University, not Chicago, but north of Chicago, at a university. And it was an intensive day of Malay language, physical education, American history, which much of it was, in my mind, American propaganda. What we were to answer if the students asked, tell me about as one of the first questions I had to deal with.
Right.
Why are you in Vietnam?
Okay.
So
the Vietnam War was you on?
the Vietnam War was definitely still on. Yes, it was.
Okay.
And they wanted you to answer questions so that it made America look good.
All right.
That's why I had to be sent to Washington at the end.
Anyway,
okay. So all of those little parts. And then we were judged by the Malay teachers, by a psychologist, by various staff.
I see.
And some did not make it. Some were deemed not appropriate. I think all of us should have gone. I don't like the system that said you can't go, but you can. I think very, very subjective.
Okay.
But anyway, I made it through. And as I was explaining earlier, I had to go and answer some questions in Washington just before coming here. Everyone else in my group went to Hawaii for final training. I went to Washington and didn't know if I would ever join the group again. But I did. And then did the final training in Hawaii. And then flew to KL, where I immediately bought myself a python. Ular sawa. Because I like snakes. Because I was, as a boy, I was raised in the mountains. No people around.
Okay.
So I grew very fond of snakes and lizards.
I see.
Anyway, we lived for I think maybe 2 weeks in KL, something like that. Then came to what was then Jesselton before it became KK.
Yes.
At the nurses' quarters is all I read. Yeah.
Nurses' quarters.
Yeah.
You mean you stay with the nurses?
There were no nurses there, so just other Peace Corps volunteers like me, and then we were dispersed. So you get on this airplane going to Tawau, you get on this airplane going to Sandakan or Labuan or many places. So there were, I can't remember how many Peace Corps teachers ended up in East Malaysia. Some stayed in West Malaysia. But I had very little contact with those people. As soon as I got to Tawau, I was here. The principal of the school. No. Xiao Pin Fu met me at the airport. This is the old airport.
Yes.
Very near my house, the government.
What plane were you flying in?
DC-3.
DC-3. Okay. All right.
And he met me at the airport, took me to my house. The first house was ever my own house. I didn't own it, but it was my house. And then on the first day of school, he took me by the hand and walked me to my classroom, which was an old temporary building. No windows. The wall only went up to here and then nothing. And then the tin roof, so when it rained, you had to stop teaching because the sound of the rain. And he walked in, he said, now everyone stood up, which surprised me. This does not happen in an American school.
This is our culture.
This is your culture.
Respecting the teachers.
Yeah. And he said, this is your class. And he left. And that was my first day. So you'll have to ask Mr. Lim what that first day was like. For me, I had prepared a lesson. One of the things in the training was how to prepare, how to do lesson plans, how to follow a lesson plan. So I had done my lesson planning. And I don't remember. I think that first day I probably just asked each student to tell me something about them. But they were very quiet, very silent.
Because they are scared of you?
Partly scared of me, partly they're scared of not being able to speak English. And I don't remember so much how we developed, but we became quite close. And there were 4 or 5 students, including Mr. Lim and another Mr. Lim, and several, I don't remember who was in that group, but ended up often in my house. So, yes. Yeah. So, and then I taught for 1 year. The Peace Corps contract is for 2 years.
2 years, yes.
But after 2 years, I could not bear to leave. So I asked to stay for another third year.
All right.
And I did that.
Uh-huh.
The Peace Corps gives you a holiday back in the United States for 1 month if you add a year or
right.
2 years. So
Okay.
I went back to the U.S. for 1 month.
Right.
Came back here. In the meantime, that war in Vietnam was going on,
All right.
and the government was drafting men my age. Yeah. So when I was in the U.S., I got a draft notice.
Okay.
Appear for your Army physical this date.
Oh, yeah.
I said, I can't do that. I have to be in class.
Right.
I have to teach my class.
Yes, yes.
So I actually spoke to someone at the Peace Corps, and I
Right.
believe I am the last person. They said, get on the plane back to Malaysia.
Oh.
Forget the Army said
All
to
right.
go on the plane, and I did. I came back to Malaysia, and actually during that time, 3 different times I was summoned to go to the war, and 3 different times God protected me. That was one of the times. Another time, I'm sorry just to ramble on like
No
that.
problem. It's very interesting to us.
After I was in the Peace Corps for 1 year, my mother and father joined the Peace Corps.
Oh.
My mother said, if I can get through, anybody can get through.
Right,
So
they
they joined the Peace Corps, sold their business, sold their house, and they went to India.
They went to India. Both of them.
Both of them. So they were in India. I was in Tawau.
Right.
And we agreed that they would come through KL to
Right.
Tawau.
Right.
I would get to show them off and so forth. But after they left India for KL, but before they arrived in Tawau, I received another notice from the Army. Report for your physical.
Oh.
Yeah. And so
They managed to track you down.
they
even
tracked
in
me
Tawau.
down. And so I could not contact them. There were no cell phones at
Right,
the time.
okay, true.
I could not contact my parents. I knew when they were arriving in KL. So I flew to KL. Ultimately I was on my way to Bangkok for an Army physical, a U.S. Army physical in Bangkok.
Okay.
I met them at the airport in KL. My mother says as soon as she saw me at the airport, she knew. She knew I had been summoned by the Army. There would be no other reason for me to be in KL.
Right.
And one day we went to a movie, and we were walking down the aisle, and God put his finger on my stomach and gave me a hernia. And as long as you have a hernia, you cannot be drafted. I did not get surgery for a long time. I went back to Tawau with the hernia and taught for some longer period. And by then the Army forgot me again.
Right.
Then I had surgery, went back to KL and had surgery. And then there was a third time that I escaped in a similar kind of good luck. So I never went to the Army. I would not have fought in that Army. I would not have gone to that war. I would have had to flee to Canada. But I didn't have to make that, or go to prison. I did not.
You do
make
not
that
agree with
choice.
the war, do you?
What's that?
You do not agree with the war, do
I
you?
definitely did not agree with the war.
Right.
Definitely did not. So that's the short experience of training and teaching.
Right.
And then after that, I went back to the United States. I met a woman who had 2 children who are still. She has since passed away of cancer, but her 2 children are grown, and her daughter will be visiting. As soon as I get back to the USA next week, she will be coming to my house for a couple of weeks vacation.
Okay.
What else? I started getting very deeply involved in anti-prison and anti-death penalty.
What kind of prison? The normal prison?
Regular prisons.
Regular prison.
Yeah.
Why was that?
Why was I involved?
Yes.
This is a good question. I'm not so sure why. I don't like the idea of. I myself cannot imagine being kept in a cage.
Right.
I want to break out. I want to. I told you I grew up in the mountains.
Free.
So to think that people cannot be free, even if they've done terrible things,
Right.
I think that the conditions that people are kept in can always be made better. That if we treat people like people and not like objects,
Right.
that was my goal. And as far as the death penalty is concerned, I've always believed killing people.
Oh, meaning to say you have death penalty then?
It's state by state by state. There's also a United States death penalty. And when President Trump was president, the last month of his office, 9 people executed.
Yes. Okay.
So usually the U.S. government is not killing people. But each state is. California which is where I am from, had an active death penalty, not as active as Texas, but active. And so from a very early age, I knew I did not believe in the death penalty. In fact, the first thing I ever wrote and had published in a newspaper, I was 12 years old. It was a letter to the editor saying, I'm against the death penalty.
When you were 12 years old.
Yes.
Where did you get all this idea?
Around the dinner table.
Around the dinner table? Meaning to say your elders, your parents,
my
and so
parents, my older brother, my sister. We talked about politics, and we didn't always agree. In fact, we often had arguments. But that taught me to speak out, to express my views, and not be afraid to express my views. And to write. I don't know. I've been writing forever. What else? So,
well, talk about your 2 teachers then, who trained you before coming to Malaysia.
So I was mentioning earlier that in Peace Corps training, we were only allowed to learn the Malay language, Bahasa Melayu. And among my teachers, there were maybe 5 or 6 Malay teachers, orang Melayu. My favorite teacher was Rais Yatim, who is now president of
Dewan Negara.
Yes, Dewan Negara. And another of my favorite teachers was Elias Omar, who became the mayor of Kuala Lumpur.
And then the head of Malaysia Badminton Association.
Yes. And Rais Yatim, in the very end of training, I learned on the very last day, we were having a party because we were the survivors. We had made it through. Others had not made it through. So we were having a celebration, and I was summoned to the director's office. And he said, I've just received a phone call from the Peace Corps in Washington, D.C., and here's your ticket for tomorrow. Said, what do you mean, my ticket? Aren't I going with everybody else? No. You're going to Washington to answer some questions about your political views. So when I went to the airport that morning, I was with everybody on the same bus to the airport. But when we got to the airport, this large group, maybe 60 or so, they went in one direction to get their airplane to Hawaii. I went in another direction to get my airplane to Washington, D.C. And there at the foot of the stairs leading up into the airplane stood Rais Yatim. To just to give me a sense of solidarity, a sense of love. And as I started to climb the steps, he took off his songkok and gave it to me. I put it on. I did not take it off the entire time I was in Washington. I still have that
entire time when you were in Washington.
It was a little bit small. My head is bigger than Rais's head. But I did not take it off. So I have a special feeling for Rais Yatim in my heart. I visited him once in KL at his home some years ago. But
when he was still a minister?
When he was a minister, yes. He might have been the foreign minister. I'm not sure what his job was at that time.
He has been a minister for many portfolios.
Many portfolios, So I have not spoken to Rais for years and years. But I will always have a special love for him.
All right. Would you like to say a few Malay words that you still remember or what you have learned? Let's see.
So, let's see. Dulu saya duduk di sini di Tawau.
Uh-huh.
Saya boleh bercakap bahasa Melayu. Okey, baguslah.
Bagus, ha?
Tetapi sekarang saya sudah lama, saya sudah lupa semua.
Was there any person who refused to speak to you in English but insist to speak to you in Malay? No.
No one ever refused. There were people who could not speak in English and
Right.
spoke to me in Malay, but no one ever refused to speak. It's not like in France. In France, they insist you speak French. They
Oh.
refuse to speak English.
I see.
No, that never happened here. I've never felt anything but welcome in Tawau.
Okay.
Everyone welcomes me.
I see. I heard from your students that you are well liked and you taught them very well.
That's
In
very
fact,
nice to hear.
your student like Mr. Lim, he said he liked English so much after you teaching him. Would you like to share with us your secret or what did you do?
Well, I don't know if it's a secret, but I can tell you that
Right.
when I was in middle school myself,
Right.
I had to study languages. So
Uh-huh.
I studied Spanish, I studied German, I
Wow.
studied French, all very badly. And
Badly.
even at university, Berkeley, I had to take language. My grades were down in the basement. Because the method of teaching is you memorize vocabulary, you memorize rules.
Oh,
So you learn maybe to read.
okay.
You might even learn to write,
Uh-huh.
but you don't speak because we do not learn to speak
Yeah.
by rules.
Yeah.
When you learned Chinese,
Right.
no one sat you down with the rules.
No,
you
no,
just listened to your mother
yeah,
and father and you repeated.
You
So
just-
that is how I learned to speak Malay. They
Ah.
taught me Malay by teaching us short dialogues. A, B, A, B, A, B.
Oh.
I was giving you an example. I still remember 55 years later this dialogue. Mana basipo? Itu basipo. Basipo bertolak pada pukul berapa?
Wow.
Basipo bertolak pada pukul 7. Sekarang pukul berapa? Sekarang pukul 6.
Wow.
Okay, bye-bye. Okay, so you take each of those sentences and you can substitute words in the right spot.
Right. Okay.
So when I came to teach English, I taught in the same method, short dialogues. I don't know if you remember any of them, and I don't remember any of them. But it might be, what's your name?
All right.
Where do you live? What's your name, and then an answer. Where do you live, and an answer. So if you can say what's your name, you can also learn to say what's your address, what's your house, what's your mother's name.
All right.
Each line has what do I want to say? A part of speech,
Right.
but you don't have to learn it as a part of speech. You don't have to learn this is the subject and this is the verb, and you don't have to learn any of that. You just have to listen and repeat.
Correct.
Listen and repeat. Substitute. So,
I see.
and some of my students learned that way.
Right.
Some did not learn that way.
Mr. Lim turned out to be an English teacher, and
Yes.
then he was well liked as well.
Also very well liked,
yeah.
and so I think of myself as first teacher,
Right.
student, grand student,
Grand student.
and now grand student because some of his students have become teachers.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
We'll take a break for a while.
Fine.
Let's have a drink. Okay.